You won't believe how simple it is to create stunning watercolor flower cards. These quick 10-minute cards can be used for Mother's Day, birthdays, greeting cards, or really any occasion you might need them for. So pull out your watercolor paints and get ready for the most relaxing and satisfying watercolor flower painting experience ever. Perfect for beginners and also just incredibly fun. Here I've got my watercolor supplies, including my paints, a paper towel, some clean water, and some brushes. Today I'm going to be using some round brushes for all three of these pieces today. Round brushes tend to be my go-to brush, and they're very general. Everyone usually has these at home already. I've got all different sizes here, and really you can use an assortment of different sizes for any of these cards or designs. All this is going to do is maybe change how large or small the flowers or the leaves are going to be, so just pull out whatever brushes you have on hand. The ones you see me holding here today are actually from my Craftamo subscription boxes. I have 12 round brushes that are included in those, all the way from small sizes to large, from the number 1 round to the number 12 round. These are awesome brushes. I absolutely love them. I'm not going to go into it right now, but if you're interested in some more information about the subscription boxes, I can leave some links and information as well as some videos that show you a little bit more about these, so you can look more into it if you like. I'll put those in the description of this video. Also, as a side note, I actually might be doing a couple more videos coming up soon that focus on filbert brush flowers as well as some angle brush flowers that are all easy to do, so make sure you keep an eye out for those. They are going to be just as much fun as these flowers that we're going to be doing today. Now, because I'm planning to do card sizes, I think I'm going to use some smaller round brushes for these, so maybe I will use the sizes 1 through 7, and we'll go from there and see what we can use. Then as far as the cards go, we do have a few options here, but sometimes I will just take a larger sheet of watercolor paper, like a 9x12, cut it into 4 pieces. Sometimes I measure them out and cut them into 5x7 or 4x6 sizes, and on occasion I use pre-made, pre-cut, folded watercolor cards that come with envelopes, so they're ready to go and mail. Today I'm actually going to be using this Meeden watercolor pad. I just barely got this, and what's fun about this is they are already cut to a 5x7 size. It's cold press, it's affordable. I love the Meeden brand, so I'm going to give these a try today. If you've ever gotten a Meeden watercolor block pad, you might notice that there is a blue sheet on the front. I actually left this in here on purpose so I could show you. You don't paint on this part. You take this off and the watercolor paper is underneath that. These pads are bound all the way around the edges with one small opening, so you can put a palette knife or something in there and cut out the pages once as you're done painting. The binding around the pages keeps it nice and tight so you don't have to tape anything. They're awesome. Okay, so I've got all my supplies ready, so let's go ahead and jump into painting. The good news about these flowers is that we are going to be using a lot of the exact same brush strokes for a lot of these flowers. We just get to use them in different ways, which is partly why these are so quick and easy. I think I'll try some flowers that are more on the short, thick petal side first, so maybe I'll pull out the number 7 round brush and give that a try. But like I say, you can use any size. It's just going to change how big or small the flowers are going to be. You can also choose to use any paint color that you want. I'm in the mood to try some yellow flowers first, maybe patterned after some yellow daisy type of flowers or black-eyed Susans or something like that. I'm just using some gamboge paint color here, and then I'll take my round brush and start making simple petal strokes by placing the tip of the brush on the page, pressing down, pulling out slightly to make that stroke a little bit more wide, and then you just lift up. You're really going to want to have brushes that have nice pointy tips for this to work well, which is something that I do love about Craftamo brushes. These strokes are very simple, very basic. It might take a bit of practice to get the hang of, but they really are very easy to do. And I'm just going to keep painting these petal strokes until I fill about half of the flower space here. We'll be painting these ones in a side profile view. You'll notice that I am painting all of these coming from pretty much that same center point, and I'm just moving around in a half circle. I'm also trying to make some of the petals a little bit longer by pulling the stroke out farther, and some a little bit shorter. This is just going to create some interest and variety with each flower. And you can paint in as many of these flowers as you want to. You have the freedom to create whatever composition you'd like. I think I'd like to fill the page pretty well, so I'm going to do maybe about 6 or so. This is a good start. I like the direction it's headed. These are just loose and fun and really quick to do. Now that we have the larger main heads of the flowers done, I think it might be fun to fill in some of the extra empty space with some flower buds as well. So using that same yellow paint, and in fact, I think I'll just even use the same brush. If you want to, you can pull out a smaller one, but I'm just going to make some really small bud shapes here and there throughout the page. Okay, well done. Let's switch over to a smaller brush now. Maybe I'll pull out a number 2 round and I'll take some olive green paint that is pretty concentrated. It's going to be fairly dark in value. And then I'll start dabbing in some dots of color for the center parts of the flowers. This is just going to tie the flower petals together and really finish off the look of the flower heads. I'll take a touch of that olive green paint and also just paint in a little bit of greenery at the very base of the buds. Nothing too complicated or difficult, just a few lines of color that can surround the bottom of the bud. And then in just a minute, we'll connect that to the stems. All right, now that we have all of our flower heads done and in place, let's go ahead and add in the stems. I want this to be very delicate looking, so I'm going to switch over to my smallest brush, which is a number 1 round. I'll use that same olive green paint and begin painting in some nice thin stem lines. It usually works pretty good to start with some of the main larger flower heads first and then work your way around the page. You'll also want to try to follow through with your stem lines and go all the way from the top of the flower to the bottom of the page. And another tip that I'd like to throw out there that I think really helps with compositions like this is to connect some of the stem lines together. If every single flower and bud has its own individual stem line that goes clear to the bottom, sometimes it can start looking a little bit busy or messy. If you tie some of the stems into each other, oh dang, look what I just did. That center part of the flower wasn't dry and I stuck my finger in that, and then as I moved, I created a big fat goober. I hate when I do that. It probably never happens to you, but it seems like it happens to me way more often than I would like. I might be able to take a touch of clean water and lift off some of that paint, but since it is such a dark green paint, I think I am going to have some goober left there. But that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just continue on with the painting, and I will address that issue in a minute, I guess. All right, I think this is just about done. So to finish this off, maybe let's add in a few thin leaves or grass lines throughout the piece. I think I'll use this number 2 round brush because I don't want them to be super thick. This is a fairly dainty painting, so I'm just going to go with that. So I'll use this number 2 round. I'll start these strokes out pretty much like I was doing with the petal strokes, but instead of stopping the stroke after I press down, then I'm going to lift up on the stroke at the end to create more of a point. So I'll do these with a light touch, press down in the middle, and then lift up at the end. So I'll do some of the larger grasses at the bottom of the piece, and then I might add a few smaller leaf shapes going along some of the stems up higher as well. But again, I'm keeping this very minimal. We don't need a lot of these. These are just accents, not the focal point. And I'm going to try to be more careful not to stick my hand in the wet paint again. All right, that actually turned out really cute and it's super quick to do. It only took me maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And even though it's so simple, it's a really pretty piece, except for my big goober blob that I made in there. So let's see if I can fix that just a little bit. Since I couldn't lift all of that color off, I think I might try pulling out some opaque titanium white watercolor paint and just dab on a touch of that color to try to cover it up a little bit. Well, that didn't turn out too bad. It's definitely not as noticeable now. In fact, you probably wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking for it. So I think we saved the card to live another day. And that is it for this card. So I can go ahead and cut this out of my block pad. It's a really pretty little painting. But with that, let's move on to another simple and easy card idea. So this time, let's try painting a similar flower, but we'll create it in a slightly different way with a different composition. Let's try maybe a cone flower type. And I think I'll pull out a number 5 round brush to make these petals longer and thinner. I'm going to pull out some alizarin crimson and I'm going to mix up 2 sections of this color, one that is darker and more concentrated with pigment and the other is slightly more watered down and lighter in value. The good news is that the petal strokes are going to be done in the same way, starting with the tip of the brush and then pulling and pressing down on the stroke. I'm going to be making these a little bit more long and a little bit more thin, and I'm going to switch around between using that concentrated paint and then the lighter paint just to give the petals a little bit of variety in value. Just like we did with the last flowers, I'm going to have some petals longer and some petals shorter, and I'm also going to be doing a side profile for these flowers again like we did before, but the one difference is that I'm going to widen that center point area so they're not all touching right in the very center. We're going to have that stamen area a little bit larger on this one. And because these flowers are going to be larger in size, I'm not going to put as many on the page this time. In fact, I think I'm just going to do 2, slightly facing in different directions. I hope you're finding this tutorial helpful and enjoyable. Handmade cards are really special and they give an extra personal touch when you're creating these to give to someone that you care about. They work for any occasion. I didn't write anything on these cards, but you definitely could do that. You could make a space and add something in on the front or even turn it over and write on the back. These are cards that people are going to cherish rather than just throw away. If you're finding that you're enjoying my painting and teaching style today, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. Like I say, I plan to do a couple more tutorials like this using some different brush types, including filbert and angle. So if you like this one, you're definitely going to want to see those. All right, now because I only have 2 flowers, let's fill in a little bit more of the space with some buds. These ones are going to be a little bit larger in size, and I may use the lighter valued paint to do that initial shape, and then I'll add in a touch of the darker paint near the bottom while it's still wet and let that spread out. Okay, very good. I think that turned out all right. Let's switch over to a slightly smaller round brush now and add in the stamen area of the flowers. I'm going to get a little bit more detailed on these ones compared to the last flower centers. So I'm going to start out with a touch of gamboge that's already on our tray, and I will paint the initial space with this color using some lines to form a semicircle connecting the petals together and tying everything in. These are definitely going to be larger in size though. Then while that paint is still a little bit wet, I'm going to pull out some cadmium orange and add a little bit of this color into the yellow. I'm not going to put it all the way up though. I want to leave some of that yellow still showing at the top. And because my paint is still wet, this color is going to bleed in a little bit, but that's okay. All right, one more color I'm going to add in here, and that is a dark brown. I'm just going to take some burnt umber and mix it with a little bit of ivory black, and then add a tiny hint of that in here right at the very base. All right, I think I'll let that dry, but I might come back in here later and add some better details. So once again, let's switch over to a different brush. I'm going to move on to the number 2 round and use some of the olive green paint that's already on my tray. I'm going to add some greenery around the base of the buds first, and then I'll use some of that paint to start adding in the stem lines. Now this time with the stem lines, I'm not going to be painting them quite as thin as we did the last time. These are a little bit more of a substantial, larger flower. So I think we can paint some larger stems on this one. I'm still just using that number 2 round, but I can press down on this brush to make it a little bit thicker, but it's not going to be too thick. Now that the center part of the flower is dry, I'm going to take a small brush and some of that dark brown-black paint and add in some slightly more detailed lines in here right at the very base. All right, the last thing I'm going to do is add in some leaves. I'll use that olive green paint once again and maybe switch over back to the number 5 round to paint in some larger leaf strokes, starting with the tip of the brush and pressing down and then letting up at the end. I'll try to create a variety of sizes with these leaves and just add them wherever I feel like it might look good. And I think that's it for this pretty little card. Again, it only took me maybe 5 to 10 minutes tops to paint this. It's really simple, really easy, and yet really beautiful. This is perfect for those quick last-minute cards that you find you might need to make right away. Okay, I'm going to show you one more card type that you can do using these round brushes and some very similar brush strokes, and again, it's quick and easy. To change my colors up this time, I'm going to use some ultramarine blue and mix it with some dioxazine purple for a really pretty blue-violet color. I might add a touch of extra water in the mix too, just so it's not too dark in value though. With these flowers, I'm going to be making them a little bit smaller in size, so I'm going to use a number 4 round brush, and instead of having only the side profile this time, I'm going to be painting the petals all the way around the flower head. We're going to be using the exact same brush strokes. We'll keep these ones a little bit on the shorter or smaller side, but as I paint the petals around in a circle, I'm going to have some varying lengths, making the petals a little bit longer on the sides of the flower and then shorter on the bottom and the tops. This way, it still gives the flower the look that it's at a slight angle or a slant while still showing the entire flower head. You can face these flowers in different directions to add some variety. I'm going to be leaving a little bit of a center area where you can add in the stamens later. And because these are smaller flowers, you can definitely add a lot more to the page and make them look more like wildflowers in a field or something. So go ahead and add in as many or as few as you like. You can change up the composition a little bit, just whatever you want to try. But another fun thing about all 3 of these cards that I've shown you today is you can actually mix and match some of these flowers together and have different flowers within the same card even. You could use different colors, just whatever you want to try. There are tons of possibilities with what we've got going on here. I'm just giving you ideas, but you can take your creativity and run with it. All right, I think that looks pretty full. I don't want to get too carried away. I think I'll stop with the main open flowers and maybe add in some buds next. These are going to be much smaller in size since our flowers are smaller, and I'm just going to add a few buds in here and there into some of these open spaces. Keep in mind you can always come back in later and add in more flowers or more buds if you need to. So right now, just keep it simple, get an idea of where you want things to be or where they might look good, but try not to overdo it yet. Okay, as I said, don't overdo it. I realize I do have a lot of buds on this one, so I may have overdone it. It looks a little bit busier than I think I would have liked, but let's go ahead and just finish it and see how it goes. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to a small brush, maybe a #1 round brush, and take some olive green paint that's on our tray. I'll add in some greenery at the base of the buds, as well as some dots of green color for the centers of the flowers. Well, my friends, it would seem this is just not my day. I stuck my hand in the painting earlier and made a big fat blob on the first card, and then after I finished this painting, I started looking at the video footage and realized that my camera shut off at the end of this card. So I apologize profusely for this, but I don't have the final footage of when I added in the stems and leaves for this painting. The good news is that it's nothing too difficult or complicated. It's very similar to what we've been doing. I decided to use the #1 round for the stems as well as the leaves in this one, since these are very small and delicate flowers. I went ahead and just used that olive green paint again and started with the stems for the open flowers first and then added in the stems for the buds. And you can see that just like before, I've tied a lot of these stems together. This painting in particular has a lot of flowers, so to do individual stems that go all the way to the bottom of the page would have been very busy looking. So I did tie a lot of these stems or flowers together if I could. And then for the leaves on this one, I also chose to just do really small, tiny leaf strokes. Some of them are even just lines, and there's not very many of them in here. Because there are so many flowers and buds on this page, I decided to take a less is more approach when it came to the greenery on this one. But in the end, I think it turned out okay. Sorry that the footage didn't turn out on this one. It just goes to show that even though I've been doing this for a long time, I still have mistakes happen every day. You just get to be a part of these ones, I guess. But here we are with our 3 different card types, all similar because we use the same types of brush strokes, and yet at the same time, they're all very different too. And like I say, you can try different colors, you can mix and match these, maybe do bookmarks or gift tags. The options and possibilities are limitless. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.